Hello, and welcome to Sailing and Cruising, the East Coast of United States podcast. I'm Bela and Mike.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
Hey, Mike, before we dive into this episode, we need to say a special thank you to Paul, our newest Patreon supporter. Thank you for the support of the Sailing and Cruising the East podcast. It's much appreciated. If you also would like to support the podcast, it's easy via Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/Sailing the East. The podcast is also now available on YouTube, as well as your favorite podcasting applications. So for you YouTube fans, just search for Sailing the East and you can find it. And on more of the recent episodes, you will actually get to see Mike's and my smiling face, as well as the smiling faces of our guests. So on YouTube, the podcasts are actually video podcast. So thanks again for all of our listeners and to our supporters. Today's guest on the podcast is Shay Love. We had a great conversation about starting out in the sailing life, and now that she is several years into it, what she has learned along the way. She's also a very accomplished musician and just released a new set of songs. You can find out more about her by searching for Shay Love Sailing. And the reason I put the sailing piece in there is Shay Love turns out to be a relatively common name in sort of the social media world. So if you put in the sailing piece, you'll find her for sure.
So, Bela, I'm always amazed how you find these kind of multi-talented people to interview. And there's so many people that are interesting in so many ways that I never even imagined. And Shay is one of these people that I think was really going to be fascinating. So it's a great find. I'm curious to hear more about her story. Let's give it a listen.
Hi, Shay. How are you? Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Hey, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, sure. This is fun. So looks like you're on your boat, which I think is also your domicile. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Very nice. So where are you right now? I mean, besides on the boat, where's the boat?
We just made it to Key West last Thursday, so I guess it's been almost a week now. So we're now new in Key West and loving it so far.
Where were you prior to Key West?
We were in Savannah, Georgia, which was also a cool place.
Yeah. I've been to Savannah. That is a nice place. Cool.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the beginning. So how did this sort of lust for traveling, and in particular on a boat, germinate?
So I grew up in a military family. Both my parents are military. And so that meant that we traveled all the time. Every 3 years, if you're a military brat, you know what I mean, you move. And I actually liked it as a kid. A lot of people are on both sides of the coin. Some people hated it. Some people loved it. I really enjoyed it as a child. And I think it just kind of planted the seed for my adulthood. So as soon as I barely even graduated high school, I, already just jumped the gun and started traveling on my own. I moved to Hawaii and I just started moving around a bunch to different locations, a year here, 6 months there, so on and so on. And eventually I realized, so already at 18, I had this idea of the adventure of sailing in my head. I don't even know where I got it from. I can't tell you. I think it's just everybody knows that it exists. And I think knowing that it exists was enough for me. I just knew it existed and I knew that that would be super cool to do someday. And so, I guess at a certain point throughout my travels, I always had that in the back of my mind. And I realized that if I wanted to continue to travel, but still care about the environment, because when I was in 5th grade, I said I was going to grow up and become an environmentalist. So I've always cared about the environment, and they were just such a big contradiction. And I kept justifying it because I do think travel is very valuable anyways. So I kept trying to find different ways to make my travel less impactful on the environment. And I knew that it would lead to sailing. And that was my next goal I have to get a sailboat because that's the only way to do it with the minimal impact that I want to create, and to see things from a totally different perspective and to get that adventure that I love. So that's kind of where the dreams planted or started.
Wow, super. I know what you mean about different perspective. There are numerous places I've been to by car, and then I've also
Yeah,
been there approached from a sailboat, and it's like a totally different perspective.
it's
It's
totally
remarkable.
different.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
and it's the same place, but it just the feeling is different, the vibe is different, everything's different.
The community, the experience, like everything that you run into is totally different, totally
Yeah.
different.
Yeah, very nice. So when did the sailing adventure begin? Take us through that, kind of the beginning of it.
Okay, so right around when I was like, I'm gonna get a sailboat, you know what, I'm doing this. It was part of my 10-year plan when I was about 21. I put it in my 10-year plan because it's a lot of money and it's a lot of commitment.
Yeah.
It's a big thing. So I decided, you know, everything, when you have a goal, you don't just, you know, there's steps to the goal. And I've always been aware of that. And so my first step was to start working on boats. So I worked on a cruise ship as a vocalist because music is my other passion. And that was cool. I loved the boat aspect of it. I didn't so much love the environmental impact and the culture of cruising. Like, I mean, not sailing cruising, but cruise ship cruising. It's not really my thing, and I honestly advocate against taking cruise ships. So realizing that after working on one that it wasn't my thing, I was like, all right, that doesn't work, but at least I know that I can handle being out at sea for a month, 6 months at a time, and not be totally happy. And, you know, just seasickness, I can get over it. It sucks, but, you know, I can deal with it. And so I knew that. And then I thought, okay, next step, move to the Virgin Islands and work on sailing boats, work on the type of boats that I want to get on someday. And then maybe I can find one and work on one and buy one, except, you know, who knows what opportunities are going to lie there in the Caribbean. So I thought, well, I'll move there. So I moved to the Caribbean. And with that in mind, and I started trying to get singing gigs on ships and, you know, different things like that. And actually what happened was I ended up becoming a roommate with my now husband on a sailing boat to see what it would be like to live on a boat, and obviously just to get further into that life. And he's obviously all about that life as well. So we were friends. I moved in the aft cabin. And after about 6 months of friendship, I fell in love. And then I put the money that I was going to use to buy my own boat into, finishing this boat. So getting a new engine, new jib lines, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, yeah. And so I had the boat. And then we got married soon into later. And the rest is history.
Oh, wow. What a great story. That's fabulous. Yeah.
Thanks.
So when did that sort of transpire? How long ago was that?
Let me remember. Starts to all become a blur right around COVID. So I remember it was in that 2019, right? 2019. Yes. I moved to the Caribbean and then COVID hit. And everybody kept making the joke of like, oh, you know, what a better place to be stuck. So it was a cool place to be stuck, but being stuck is still being stuck. Everybody's careers were on hold. Everybody's dreams were on hold, including mine. But I guess I made small progresses throughout that. You know, I moved on a boat and explored it for a while, had a friend to hang out with, you know, and made slower progress, but still progress. But yeah, I think that's the reality for everybody throughout the COVID times.
Great. Tell us a little bit about the boat.
It's a Bombay Explorer. It's 44 feet. It's a monohull. And it's great. It's awesome. It's got a 7.5 foot draft. So it's really awesome to take out at sea. Really difficult to take through the ICW, but that's okay because the sea is faster and more. You see more.
Yeah. What year is it? What year is she?
It's a 1978.
Oh, okay. Great. And so it sounds like you did some work on it and a refit. So take us through some of those things.
So I think the very first thing we did was, so when we went to go make the major fixes, that was in Grenada. So the little things are hard to remember. They kind of all, because there's always, if you know a boat,
because they're constant.
Everything's always breaking. So it's like trying to backtrack. And now I'm remembering. So I think one of the very first things, Ryan does most of the repairs because that's his his career. That's his thing. He's really great at that. So the first thing was the fridge. So I moved on the boat and there was no fridge. It was a very different boat than it is now. There was no fridge, and there was a lot of things that weren't working properly. And so the very first thing, well, there was a fridge, but it wasn't usable anymore because somebody before us put a countertop over the fridge. So there was no fridge anymore because it was under the counter and it was no longer accessible. So getting a new fridge. So that was a big thing. And we actually, how much did you get that boat for, Ryan? I mean, that fridge for? $100. That's what I thought I was going to say. So he got the fridge for $100 because it wasn't working, but being so mechanically inclined, he fixed the fridge and then installed it. And then so that was the very first thing. And then a lot of other steps to make it more livable and more enjoyable. And then the next big thing, we didn't have a motor, but we decided to go to Grenada anyways for the storm season. So we had a motor, but it was in shambles and it was not working properly, and just the reality of many boat stories. So we went down to Grenada to do a haul out and to do all kinds of repairs. And that was a difficult sail because we lost wind for 3 days. And so if you have been at sea without a motor, you just bob around in one spot for days until the winds come back, and so then they finally come back. And that was it was like, it's such an exhilarating feeling, just the ups and downs of a sailing voyage when you like really take a big voyage, 7 days at a time. The ups and downs can be so exhilarating. So we finally made it. And the haul outs, again, the ups and downs of boat restorations, again, you got your super high exhilarating moments and your really low moments where you find it's not going to be as easy or as quick as you thought it was going to be. So we got a new motor put in during that, painted the bottom, fixed a big chunk that got taken out from the anchor. I've heard this happening to other people as well. During a sail, the anchor had popped off and took out a huge chunk at the bowsprit. And so we had to get that all repaired. So lots of repairs in Grenada, and then finally got it back in the water. And again, that's one of those high moments.
Yeah. Wow. Very nice. So you got on the boat in the Bahamas, was it?
In the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Oh, okay.
St. Thomas.
So that's sort of where the sailing adventure started.
Yes, exactly.
Got it.
And first little trips, just little day sails to St. Croix, St. John, and then like the first big one was 3 nights or three days and 2 nights. I think it was. And that was, kind of around the U.S. Virgin Islands, the British Virgin Islands. And then finally we took that big one to go to Grenada to go get these repairs done.
Yeah. So tell me about your first overnight experience sailing.
Oh, good question. It was horrendous. It was awful. If I'm telling the truth. So it was literally about as bad as my first night on the cruise ship. First night on a boat, period, can be really rough. Even if you've been on a boat before, if you take a year off and you go back, it's square one again sometimes. So it was the worst, seasickness, just, not, and also just, so what happened is a lot of things, because this was the first big sail, there were things that we weren't aware that were problems. Right. So there was water coming into the V-berth. And so our bed was soaked, like a water bed. So I went to go to bed that night after being seasick all day, seasick, obviously. And I went to bed on a soaking wet bed. And it was one of my top 5 worst night's sleep of my life. I did not sleep because, the boat's moving and it's totally really a different rock than a power boat or a cruise ship or other boats, and so the rocking, and then again, like I said, being soaking wet, and then also feeling like I'm gonna vomit at any second. But then I woke up to this gorgeous sunrise in this what's the word I'm looking for? Uninhabited island, and it was all worth it. I'm being honest about that as well. That honestly, those moments made it worth it. I knew that the pros or the good outweighed the bad. So I take both sides.
Yeah, well, that's great. That's a good story. I certainly cherish the overnights, because I find if I have a watch, it doesn't matter what time the watch is, if it's dark, uh, I just love the stars and the
Yeah,
scenery and the bioluminescence when you have that. It's just, there's something about
exactly.
sailing and being on the ocean at night that is totally different than being on the day during the day. They're both spectacular, but they're spectacular in different ways.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I like now, like I said, after once you start to get your sea legs in, you start to really appreciate those small moments. And you have to have a certain personality to live on a boat. And so living on, and to sail and stuff. So I think I wrote a poem once that said, sailing is slicing through a sea of boredom while thinking aloud endlessly. And it sounds so depressing, but for me, that was a happy poem because I really love the silence and the time to reflect and to think out loud and
Right.
to watch the stars and to just not care and to meditate. I mean, it is meditative, and it's, like you said, very humbling, and it's a peaceful and beautiful experience. So I
Yeah.
agree. The nights are
Yeah.
gorgeous.
Yeah. They're one of my favorite times. Um, so what has been sort of the biggest challenge for you?
Patience.
Mm,
I'm not a patient person. I can be patient with children sometimes, but I'm not patient. I hate to admit that, but that's one of my bad side or bad qualities of my
yeah.
personality. So I've really had to battle with that bad quality or bad trait of mine. It can be bad that I have very little patience, and
So
so
how does that
you know,
manifest itself on a passage?
I exactly. I get it's not so much on the passages that I don't have patience. Although I feel it running short, it's mostly just the patience of realizing that boats are they are slow, they take a lot of work. When you thought something was going to be able to happen at this time of year, it's all of a sudden pushed back a whole year or two because everything is and just finally, I guess, accepting that. And I'm still working on that because every time like I get this goal in mind or something, there's a setback. And I think that's in many things, but especially boaters maybe can relate that there's those setbacks, and just being patient and accepting that, and accepting that things are constantly changing. And on a passage, you might have thought it was only going to take 7 days and suddenly it's 10 days, and you can't have a deadline, or if you do have a deadline, just breathe
Right.
and
Right.
let go of it, and cancel something if you need to. But that's been really tough for me, and I think it's a very good lesson because I think it's, like I said, it's one of my weak spots that I think it's beautiful. It's great that in my life I'm being forced to work on it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's an excellent point in that however long you think something's going to take, it'll take longer, whether that's a passage or whether it's fixing something or whether it's cooking dinner. and
Exactly.
and we get accustomed to doing things at a certain pace in sort of our land life or our previous
Mhm.
lives, and then to get out of those habits takes a long period of time. It's not quick. So yeah, that's a
Totally
challenge.
agree. And being
Yeah.
able to just coordinating things, and in land life, you can, it's so much more flexible. But like I said, that it's all worth it in the end, and it's beautiful to learn those lessons. But on a boat, it's not immediate, and it's not all, you have to be super flexible because it's always going to take longer and be different. It's always going to be different.
Yeah. Yeah. So what has been some of the highlights for you of the about 3 years now, probably close to it, that you've been doing this?
Like that. The sales. I like you said, those beautiful moments, the nights, we talked about in the beginning, I love being able to experience things. I said from a perspective that really hardly anybody else gets, like
Mm-hmm.
literally from being out in the ocean, like being way out there and seeing whales, or seeing nothing, but just seeing nothing and seeing only blue for miles. People talk about driving through Kansas. It's just like that. You just see
Right.
blue only for
Yeah.
miles. And I think that those experiences are just, that's what I've always sought after in my life. That's what started the love of travel, is experiencing things that are gorgeous and humbling and crazy, and things that other people don't really get to experience. And yeah, like, just, there's so many of those small moments, you know, like driving, seeing an underwater volcano and having to navigate around that, because you're like, oh, why can't we go over that? Oh, I guess we might explode. We couldn't do that. You know, things like that you'd never think about in regular land life, you know, and
Yeah.
seeing things, and just having those moments. Like there's a trench outside of Puerto Rico. And so just driving over the deepest areas of the ocean, and to think about that, like, wow, I'm above the deepest area in the ocean right now, you know, in the world, or you know, that I think it might be, is it the deepest or the second deepest? It's very deep though. So those
Yes.
moments for me are all my high points, and there's so many of them to name. But I saw a sperm whale once. I'll never forget that. And just the blue, the blood moon rising sometimes, you know, like
Yeah.
over this eclipses, and you happen to be sailing during an eclipse, you know, just things like that. I love those high moments.
Yeah. So you were doing a lot of this during the whole COVID experience, and many parts of the Caribbean were locked down pretty tight, so travel was very restricted. What were some of those challenges like?
Very difficult. Again, that was like one of those patience things, because costs a lot to travel, and it's just a little frustrating and ridiculous, the costs, you know, because you just don't plan for things. So we went to Grenada, and all of a sudden when we showed up, there was a new, I don't want to call it a new regulation, where now it was going to cost $500 US to get in, because of all the fees that were adding up. And I was like, even though the exchange rate's like really, you know, a lot in our favor, it still was expensive to pay for all the testing. And then like hoping to be able to island hop on the way back, but not being able to, because either places were closed down completely, or there were huge fees to get COVID tests before you arrived, and then upon arrival, and then again 2 weeks into being there, and then you have to pay for all of them because you're the one that wants to travel. And so I can understand it, but it's very difficult and frustrating. So a lot of that was just, you know, going around the US Virgin Islands for the first year, and then skipping islands. So our plan, again, plans change when it comes to boating. It's an outline, it's an idea. Our idea is to head back to the Caribbean from Key West this winter, possibly, an idea, and see if we can't hit some of those islands that we did have to skip during COVID, if they've opened back up. So it was very frustrating to navigate that, and always having to like research online and find the correct information. Very difficult. So it'd be nice. It'll be very nice to go back without some of those headaches.
Yeah. Nice. So your plan is to go back to the Caribbean. Do you have a date in pencil circled on the calendar for departure?
Not quite yet. So right now we were thinking, we have an idea of how long though. We have a wedding in March that we'd love to make it to. One of my husband's, Ryan's friends is getting married, and a really, really good friend of his. And so we'd love to make it to that. It's in the US Virgin Islands, where we all, you know, where it all started. So we got to go back there, and that'll be really, really amazing to see all those people again, because a lot of them knew what we were trying to do. And I think it'll be a really cool, and also for us to see some old friends that we haven't seen in so long. But yeah, just to see people after it all, and to revisit what other people have accomplished as well as what we've accomplished, will be really cool to go back to where it all started. And so that's our hope. And we're thinking, again, the wedding's in March. So ideally leaving like end of February, like 2 weeks, so that we have a big window to make it. And then if there's extra time, we could possibly stop at Cuba. We would love to go to Cuba, and a couple of other islands on the way. So we'll see. But that's the idea. That's the idea. Second week of February, third week of February, somewhere around there. We'll see.
Yeah, that sounds great. And do you have sort of an idea for hurricane season coming up? So you'll be in the Caribbean, and then before you know it, June pops around.
Hurricane is going to come around. Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, this was our idea for last summer. So we really hope to do it this summer. It didn't end up panning out last summer. Our idea for this summer is to make it up to New York or Boston, New York, that kind of upper East Coast, northern East Coast area would be really cool this year. So last year we made it to Savannah, and that was a crazy sail because we got hit by a squall in the Bahamas and totally destroyed much of everything. So we didn't end up making that goal last summer because of all the damage that the boat took and having to fix all of that repairs and all that. So hopefully next summer.
Yeah. Well, that's I'm up in up near Newport, so
oh, nice.
That's where I'm at, and that's where my boat is. Yeah. So it's part of the East Coast experience, the Northeast Coast experience.
Yeah.
So, very nice. Yeah, it's great sailing up here. The scenery's, extraordinary. And once you get sort of north of Boston, it can get very rural very quickly. And, the sailing up in Maine and stuff is really fantastic. So
nice. Yeah.
If you're going to do that, I highly recommend it. Yeah.
I've definitely heard about it. We have some friends up in Maine as well that came from the Virgin Islands, well, from Maine, then to the Virgin Islands and back to Maine. And they've said, brilliant things about it.
Yeah.
So I'd love to see it.
Cool. So I want to switch over to talk about your other career, kind of your singer-songwriter career. But before we do that, is there anything else on the sailing side that we should talk about or you want to mention?
No, I think that's good. I think we pretty much captured the highs and lows, squalls and repairs versus beautiful moons and adventurous places, highs and lows. So it's great.
Yeah, and
I think that sums it up.
It's interesting that the highs and lows can be sometimes separated by a few seconds.
Oh yeah, definitely. I agree.
It's not like a week of highs and then a week of lows. It can be that, but sometimes it's perfect right now, and 2 seconds later it's like, oh crap, what's going on?
Yeah, and sometimes the other way around. So I've had a low to high because we got hit by the squall, which was terrifying, and then I can't describe unless you've been there the feeling of finally seeing the coast, that you've made it out of the squall and that everything's fine. I mean, everything's destroyed, but everything is fine. And the land's right there, and we're going to go anchor and figure things out. And seeing the land can be such a euphoria, or seeing, the end of a bad time can be honestly a huge high as well. Just like, wow, it's all, it's finished, or whatever. Yeah. And also just, that makes the experiences after even more valuable to you and more meaningful, because it's like, wow.
It's over. So let's talk about that squall a little bit. Take us through that experience a little. What happened, etc.
So early in the morning, like 5 a.m., I was sleeping because we do it in shifts. We take shifts of, like most people. So 4 hours on, because there's two of us. It's awesome when there's three of us, but right now, a lot of the times there's two of us. And so we have to do 4 hours on, 4 hours off. So I was sleeping. My guess is like around 5 a.m. It was still pretty dark, like just the first light. And all of a sudden I heard Ryan calling me. He said, Savannah. And then the next thing I heard, so I was waking up because I did not think it was an emergency. I just was getting my coat on and gonna come upstairs and see what was happening. Maybe it was my turn already, even though right. And so I was gonna come up and see what happened, but all of a sudden I just heard these winds and this boom hit the boat, and I just scrambled to get up to the cockpit, and the boom had unintentionally jived all the way over to the port side, and because the winds were just changed direction. They changed it. All of a sudden the wind is going in a different direction, and it's going 40 mile per hour, and so it's 40 mile an hour winds about roughly. And I was terrified driving because a lot of things require a lot of strength. And so things like, so what happened was our jib ripped and it went into the water.
Yeah.
And it was
oh gosh.
trailing under the boat. So Ryan, while I had to take the helm and he had to go and cut it off because there was obviously nothing else to do at that point. And tried to, reef the main or even just pull it down, but it got caught. It got stuck. One of the cars got stuck. So that got ripped as well. Not as badly though, it was repairable. But yeah, just awful. And driving through that, watching him and also just scared in general, but every moment feels like an hour, and you've never seen the boat and the winds behave that way, and it can be really, you feel so small. Really humbling, and it's terrifying. And so once finally things like you get a plan of action, like, all right, it's ripped, it's gone, and you start to assess the situation, and you've been driving and it's terrifying because the boat heels over harder than ever before, and you feel like you're going to capsize, even though that sailboats hardly ever do, but it's just it's so scary. So, and then you get it back and you get on the wheel and you got it back again, and now you're in control for a couple of minutes, and then all of a sudden the wind takes it again. And so finally though, like when you get out of it all and when you get a plan of action, because you can't tell, we don't have radar, and so we can't tell which direction the storm came from or is going. We do now, but that was one of the upgrades. So then we did not have a radar, and we only just went by looking. Are there clouds? So that was a big lesson. Getting a radar became very, very important to us after that. But yeah, we didn't know which way the storm was coming from or which way it was going. So I just remember clutching the wheel and just knowing to just keep the boat, afloat. And now I've learned that you should sail straight into the wind during a squall, or so I've been told by more seasoned and saltier sailors when we told them the story. At the time though, when I was, driving, when I was sailing, I just felt like I was just trying to keep it in control. So when you finally, get out of it, it feels amazing, the relief that washes over you, and so actually though, what happened to us is once we got out of it, after going in different directions and just trying to keep it under control and checking the GPS, but then the GPS fried because too much water got on it. And so then we had no GPS, and finally getting out of it and seeing another storm behind the boat. And then finally getting some service because we were just trying to make it to the land that we could see in the distance, which was the island of Eleuthera in the Bahamas. And finally getting one bar of service to make a phone call and calling another sailor and asking him what was going on. And he looked at the weather for us and said that there was a change, just like very common at least in the Bahamas. So we've learned that they get little squalls, thunderstorms, high winds, things like that. And so there was just a chain of them going up, hitting the, the northeastern side of the Bahamas, just kind of traveling along there and then dissipating. But we got stuck in that. And then we finally made it out. And we didn't get hit by a second one. And like I said, that relief and honestly, just the euphoria and just that sangria tasted so good that night. It tasted so much better than it did 3 days before. So it just, it's so humbling. And I wouldn't want to do that again, but I think that as a person and having that, I don't regret the experience either. And I'm glad that I had it, even though I wouldn't do it over.
Well, I think those experiences also build your level of confidence in being able to deal with unanticipated events when they come, right? Even though if it may not be exactly the same unanticipated event, you've learned from that about, okay, how to handle things under stress, what to do if this happens, etc. So
totally agree. And it's almost like training in the worst possible training, but it's like now I'm that much better if anything were to happen again, knock on wood.
Right. As you were telling that story, my question, I was going to ask you was about if you had radar or not, because it's amazing on a full moon night how well you can see out at sea.
Oh,
And
totally.
on a cloudy night, how dark it is. You can't see
You can't see anything.
Yeah. So if there's no lightning,
All
if it's
you
just a squall with no lightning, you don't even know it's coming until it's on top of you.
exactly. And
Yeah.
sometimes all you see is like way off in the distance lightning, but you can't tell how close that is. I mean,
Right.
you can obviously see if it's right there, but if it's 20 miles, 100 miles, all you see is lightning. It's very nerve-wracking. You're like, oh,
It
there's
is.
lightning out there.
Right.
Wow, which way is that going? How close is that? So it is
Exactly.
kind of scary. But just keeping an eye on everything. And sometimes there's storms that have, very little wind. So it just all
Right.
it's kind of hard to tell. There's just rain, just rain, and that's it. And it's just rain, and it's
Yeah.
a dark cloud of rain. But it can't always tell. Sometimes you can tell though. But once you see it, then you know.
Yeah.
Once
Well,
you're in
that's a
it, then
great,
you know.
yeah, that was a great story. So let's dive a little bit into music. So tell me about your music career and all of that stuff.
Yeah. So about the same time I went to work on a cruise ship, I think I hit I don't think people have midlife crises. I think that people have epiphanies at many moments in their lives. I think that at many different crossroads, you realize that you're not doing what you want to be doing, and you want to be doing something different.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
I hit one of those, and whatever you want to call it. And I realized I love my parents, but I had been subconsciously or pushed in a direction without realizing that it was me doing the pushing, but I was trying to please what I thought my parents wanted, and it wasn't what I wanted at all. And I'm glad I went to college, and it was great. But I realized, I said, okay, well, I'm finishing this degree, but I don't want to use it because it's fascinating, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to be, and my degree was in psychology. And so I realized, I was like, wait a minute, I don't like to listen. I like to talk.
Yeah, but I will say that your psychology degree helped you figure this out.
Yeah, probably. I definitely think that psychology degree is one of the most versatile degrees. Like it helps. It's just knowledge, it's very interesting for all walks of life, for your relationships and music even, and et cetera, and sailing, and it helps you with so many things. So I definitely am glad I got it. And I realized that this isn't what I want to do at all. I don't want to be a therapist. It's a great job, but it's not for me. I don't like paperwork. I don't like desks. And so I secretly had always wanted to be a singer, a lead singer of a band. When I was a child, I said, I want to be I want to be Britney Spears. I want to be a lead singer of a band. And I sang like every singer. I grew up singing every single day of my life. And at some point I realized that I don't have to be scared to tell people this is what I want, because I think I was holding back always, just like with sailing. When you tell people, oh, I'm going to do this, sometimes people, like my mom used to my parents would laugh, because it is kind of crazy and out there. Oh, sure, honey, use your college money to buy a boat. Okay. And, and there, it doesn't, it's what you want though inside that matters. It's in your heart. And, and so it's a little scary to tell people that what your real dreams are. And I think it's important to go for it anyways and to do it. And so finally I realized that it was important to do it, even though I was scared. And so I went and auditioned for The Voice of Germany. I was living in Germany at the time. Wow. And I made it on the show. And unfortunately, I lost my voice.
No.
I got laryngitis on the day of the blind auditions. Yeah. So, but there's a lot of auditions that come before that. And it was a 6-month long process, very, very fulfilling. And I thought, I love this. This is exactly what I want to be doing. I've always known this is what I want to do, and I need to start doing this. And then I went to work on a cruise ship, realized that that's not the right path either. So then I thought, well, I'll just join my own band. So I joined a jazz band in St. Thomas. And we started playing, and I loved it. And then I started writing my own music on the side. But again, that fear can really hold you back for a while. So I had songs since I was 15, but I never showed anybody. So I was always that it's not a fear like that, like a storm type of, like hitting a squall. It's a different kind of fear. It's it's I don't really want that type of a fear. It's, oh, what will people think? Oh, it's not realistic. Oh, who are you kidding? That negative voice, that's the fear. It's that negative voice in the back of your head. Oh, your songs aren't any good. And so then you finally, I guess, don't listen to the voice and do it. And so that's what I realized. And it took going through college and trying out different things. Oh, a teacher. No, I don't like that. Okay, maybe a psychologist. No, I don't like that. I really just wanted to do what I want to do. And that's play music and come out with my songs and sing and perform. So I started performing and I never stopped. After I was performing on the side during in college, though. Throughout, I was doing open mics all the time, talent shows. I did a couple of plays, acting and musicals and things. And then I finally realized that people always thought it was just a hobby, and I didn't want it to be, but I pretended. And so I finally decided to perform for money instead of just a hobby. So yeah, that is where I'm at, and continuing to come out with music. I'm coming out with my 5th single. This one is called Spring Breeze. Spring Rain. I was just gonna say my last single was called Ocean Breeze, so I totally just crossed the titles over. So Spring Rain comes out January 7th, and I'm hoping to release an EP this spring. Trying to get some shows in Key West, and I record music on the boat, and I love it.
Wow, that's fabulous. So we've been talking for almost 40 minutes here. So I'm going to start wrapping it up. So if people want to learn more about your music, where do they go? How do they find out?
So I have a Linktree, which will lead to everything. Actually that's a harder address to explain. So let me think of an easier way. So an easier thing is to look me up on Instagram or Facebook. And then the Linktree will be in the about or the bio section. And you can click on that and it'll go to all my different links. So my Instagram is _Shay Love. Or you could maybe just type in Shay Love and look for me. And my Facebook again is Shay Love. Love is my middle name. It's my stage name. And then if you want to look up Shay Love on Spotify, my last single was Ocean Breeze. So if you type in Shay Love, Ocean Breeze, or any other platform that you listen to music on. I just know Spotify is the most popular, but YouTube or Amazon, wherever you like to listen to music, just look it up. And again, if you find my Facebook or Instagram and click on the link in the bio, then you can get all those other links as well.
Yeah, I will make sure you sent me that Linktree in the email exchange, and I will make sure that gets into the show notes. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Yes. So if you click on that Linktree, it leads to all the different things.
Yeah. Super. So is there anything that I haven't asked you or we haven't talked about that you want to kind of share before we sign off here?
No, I think that's good. Again, keep an eye out for my EP. Hopefully my goal is to go on tour this summer. So if you follow me, then you'll get all that information.
Super. Well, thank you very much for being a guest on the show. You were wonderful. I really enjoyed our conversation, and maybe our paths will cross this summer if you come up to New England.
Yeah, I hope so. That'd be awesome. I'll keep an eye out for you.
Okay. Thanks, Shay.
It was great talking to you, and thank you for having me.
Bela, what a interesting person and a great story. And, I think we finally found somebody who's the exact opposite of you on most dimensions. Okay. I'm not sure about that, but very different upbringing, right? And very different approach to the world than you are, but equally as interesting. So I'm curious to what's your takeaway here, especially kind of for young people, in your opinion, because I thought that this was a great story. I mean, great story for everybody, but really interesting for young people trying to figure out their next steps in life.
Yeah. Well, we might have very different backgrounds, but we're both sailors. Exactly.
Common thread.
Yeah. Common thread. Although I will say one of the things that she did, and she was from a military family, which means they moved around every 3 years. And I will tell you that when I was in 6th grade, it was my 5th different school district I had lived in. So there was an early part of my father's career when we first came to this country where we moved around a lot. And he did that for betterment of his career, right? Because, we came here with nothing. And so we moved around a lot. So I did have that commonality with her. And I've often thought about this because it nurtured me in a way that I did not hold on to things in the past. So I learned, maybe hard way, that looking forward is a much more exciting thing for me as a kid growing up than trying to look backwards and hold on to things, because I knew those things that I currently had today, the friends or the acquaintances or the house we lived in, at some point in time, chances are is going to be gone, and I was going to have to explore something new. And it gave me that sort of gene or wanderlust, right? That I enjoy. And if you look at my career, right, I've done a lot of different things. I haven't done the same thing for 30 or 40 years. So I do say we do have that one thing in common. It's also an interesting contrast to Elaine, my wife, who grew up in the same house that she was almost born and grew up in the same house. She lived in two different houses her whole life growing up. And her father worked for the same company her whole life. And we often talk about the differences of how we think about things, and this notion of, how we hold on to various different things, and we value things interestingly differently, right? Elaine once said this really interesting thing. She said, one of the great things about our relationship is that if we had to write down the 10 things that are really, really important to us on a piece of paper, if we compared those two pieces of paper with each other after we wrote them down, we would have the same 10 things on the list, but the order would be slightly different. Right?
That's cool.
And so anyway, you got me going on
try
a slight.
that with Sandy. I think it'd be about the same. I mean, we've been together for 30 years, right? Almost. So It's like, okay, I think that we're, those 10 things would be all there, but I agree. I think ours would be in a slightly different order. It's a good test for everybody. Well, I don't know. We don't want to ruin any relationship. I think it's kind of an interesting thought experiment, at least.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. So a couple of things that I thought were interesting. This notion of taking the first step, right? Of, we just got to do it. And there's been other people on this podcast, other guests that we've had said, the first step is the hardest. And once you take that first step of saying, okay, we're going to do this, and then you do the first thing that's necessary to start in that direction, the second step's easier. The third step's even easier. And before you know it, you're along the way. And I think this notion of sailing, I think it's just a great way of traveling. If you want to see the world, it's just a remarkable way to do it. And to have this great connection with nature and sort of the world. And I've gone to various different places, and I've been there by car. If you drive there, you get a certain view of it. If you go there by an airplane, you get a totally different view. If you have a window seat and you get a chance to look out and it's not cloudy, right? And if you go there by boat, it's even more astonishing way to kind of approach a city and to sort of look at it, right? And it's totally different than driving down, an interstate and driving into the city. So I just think it's a great way of traveling, and taking that first step and diving it head first and doing it. And that would be the thing that I would say. And look, everybody doesn't have to say, I'm going to sail around the world. A lot of people have that dream. Very few people do it. I think somebody once said there's more people who have summited Everest than have, solo sailed around the world.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't mean you have to sail around the world, but just do what I do, right? Sailing around the coast or sailing around the lake. It's just, there's this exploring aspect to it, which really connects with me. I don't know. What did you think, Mike?
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you're saying. And even, okay, we can sit here and say, okay, we're two fairly well-off old white guys. And there is a high cost of entry to sailing, in the sense that the way you do it, right? To buy a boat and to have a slip at the marina and to pay for fuel and so on and so forth. But I liked what Shay said too. I went and got a job. You know what I mean? Right? I just started working. And so even if you don't have a lot of money and you're just starting out and you think you might be interested in this, right? it's actually a low cost of entry in terms of, yeah, there's plenty of ways to go and right, you have to learn a little bit about sailing, and you can take some inexpensive courses, and you can, right, there's some clubs, neighborhood clubs and things like this you can get involved with. But, right, once you have the basics, you can get a job and get paid to do it. Not a lot of money in most cases, but you can at least get your foot in the water, so to speak, or dip your toe in the water. But I like how she approached this. And I also liked one thing that in terms of the environmental footprint of sailing, and I thought that was really interesting, comparing the cruise ships and the sailing, right? Even bigger sailing ships, right? There's just a difference in the resources consumed. And I like she was pretty careful not to totally trash, these big cruise ships, because obviously many, and I can't speak because I've never been on one in my whole life, but that many people do this, right? And it's a big industry. But I do think people should think about their footprint, and I like how that fit into her calculus. But then I like this whole other part of her career, and how there's this person that has multiple passions, and she kind of found this way to make them fit together. I thought this was really, really cool, right? And thinking a little bit creatively and trying to say, oh, people said I could never do this, and she found a creative way to make it work. I love that, right? I love this open mind and this creativity, and she tested and experimented, right? This is something that we encourage entrepreneurs to do, right? Test your business model. If you think about this as our side gig as entrepreneurial podcast hosts, right? Or entrepreneurial teachers, right? And coaches, this is what we encourage people to do. Develop a unique business model, test it, refine it, pivot when you need to, right? She's had a couple of pivots, right? And she's made a nice life right where she wants to be, right? She's combined these things together to put herself in a position that, at least at this point in her life, right? And she's still pretty young, she's exactly where she wants to be. And she did it through creativity and hard work and some luck. I get it, right? Started off probably with some privilege. I get it, right? But she really did this on her own, and she did it the hard way in a lot of ways, right? Really cool story.
Yeah. When you were talking about sort of the environmental impact, it reminded me of when I was crewing on a boat that we sailed from Halifax, Nova Scotia, down to Baltimore. And so I was a crew person on a friend's boat. I was the third person on the boat. And so a couple owned the boat. And I can remember, we'd prepare meals, and I would offer to do the dishes. And they said, no, that's okay, we'll do them. No, I want to help. No, we'll do them. And after like the second day of that, I said, like, how comes you don't want me to do the dishes? And it very nicely said, because people who live on land waste a ton of water, and we only have 175 gallons. And then it dawned on me, right? So when you're on a boat, you get very conscious about resources.
Every drop counts.
Every drop counts. And then they explained they never let guests or crew wash dishes, because we turn the faucet on at home and water's running all the time, right? You can't do it that way, man. You got to save water. So I think that's the other great thing about when you're sort of disconnected from the grid, so to speak. And by the grid, not just the electricity, but the water, the sewer, all of those things, right, that we take for advantage. You really tune into that stuff. And you really start to value that resource and be very conscious about not using it efficiently. Right? So
agreed.
Yeah. Any other takeaways for you, Mike?
No, just, don't be afraid to take some risks if you're in a position to do that, like she was, and keep your eyes open and your mind open, and meet people and figure out a way to accomplish your goals. I mean, I guess set some goals first, right? She had some goals in mind, and then find a way to do it. But I think this is a really nice story for young people to hear that might not be in a traditional career path, or might not, right, have traditional training, right, or whatever, is find a way to put yourself in a position to be in the place you want to be at the time you want to be in, and good things will happen,
I agree. Yeah, I agree, Mike.
Cool stuff. All right, well, my watch says it's probably time we should wrap things up.
Sounds good. Let's wrap it up.
All right, listeners, thanks for joining us for another episode. We hope you found our conversation with Shay Love interesting and thought-provoking. And as always, if you have questions about what we just discussed, please get in touch with us. Our email is sailingtheeast, that's all one word, @gmail.com.
Hey, and if you joined the podcast, hit that follow button on your favorite podcasting app and tell your friends about it. And if you know someone that would be a good guest for the show, reach out to us and let us know. We would welcome the opportunity to have a conversation with them. So hope to see you out there on the water. Spring is around the corner. So until next time, signing off from upstate New York. See you all soon.
Sounds great, Bela, from over here in Münster, Germany. We'll see you next time.